Now there's so many videos of people telling you how to practice, including myself, and giving you practice tips. But there comes a time when perhaps you've done too much practice, and when should I stop a practice session? And I feel like this question doesn't get asked enough about, so I'm going to answer it in today's video. When practicing, we often have this sort of bell curve perhaps. When you start, you're perhaps at your lowest, and you work your way up the curve until you get to a point where you've achieved whatever you wanted in your practice session. But there's a bit which doesn't get talked about, is it starts going down towards the end of the practice session, and not quite as far down. Let's say the beginning's there, you can end about there if you're really over practice, whereas you want to end up here. And essentially it comes with experience after all, and it depends on the situation and necessity and things like that, but you need to realize the point when you've got the thing, and you need to tell yourself in that moment, okay, this is when I need to stop. When you're on that musical high, that is when you want to stop. And let me tell you why. In the moment, you may feel like, oh no, I need to keep practicing this. I'm enjoying this so much. This is so good. You want to stop at that high after you've got it, maybe just a few times. You don't just have to get it after you've got it the first time. Maybe try it again, and perhaps if you fail it for the second time, just leave it there as well. But I would actually say a good thing, especially if you're new to this sort of when should I stop practicing and you're unaware of when you should stop practicing, and you haven't really given this much thought. As soon as you've achieved the thing which you've been wanting to do as a practice session, this is a great way to think about it, that is when you end your practice session. Once you've done the thing you set out to do, and you've just done it once, and you've done it for the first time, that is where you should end your practice session. Just end it right there. End it on that musical high. You've done the thing which you set out and achieved to do. The practice session has been successful. And while you can do it a couple of other times, that gives you a lot more risk for error, and that does demotivate us, especially once we've just had that high and we start coming down, and you'll gradually realize, I just keep making more mistakes, and then you get frustrated at yourself, and then you reach a point where you're just like, oh, I'm just going to give up. And the thing is, you don't want to reach that point. You want to stay at that high once you've just done it for the first time, especially if you're new to this. Once you've done the thing that you set out to do, then just end your practice session there. And you might say, well, what are the advantages of ending on a high apart from, you've achieved the thing for the practice session? Why can't I just keep working on it more? Surely it's just going to keep getting better. Well, I've partially explained why that isn't the case, as there's a lot more room for error, and often in cases, if it's a real challenge for you and it's been a challenge for you, you'll notice that it'll start to fall off as you sort of play it too much. You overplay it and you start making mistakes. And also, another reason why you don't want to do that is you may not think about this when you're playing and learning through things. When you are playing something and you're making mistakes, you are learning the mistakes, in air quotes, essentially. Your fingers are learning the mistakes. If you keep making those mistakes over and over and over again, and you just keep trying to hammer it out and get the right thing out, then that is a bad thing, because you're learning the mistakes. You're making it harder for yourself to not play the mistake if you keep playing the mistake over and over again. So that is when it's time to slow that thing down and stop making the mistakes. But if you end on a high once you've just got it right, you leave less room for you to even need to do mistake correction. There's essentially more work that needs to be done if you keep practicing that affects you negatively once you've reached that initial high. And the main reason I feel it is so important to end on that practice high is because it really makes you want to come back the next day and do the same thing, because consistency is key when it comes to music. Practice makes perfect, but if you're consistently practicing, no matter for how long each day, could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes, could be an hour, could be several hours, if you do that every single day and you're consistent with it, and you end your practice sessions on a high, you're always going to feel motivated to get back into the swing of things and just get playing music again. As when you end your practice sessions on a high, you're on that high, you feel so invigorated, so happy and excited about the music that you're playing, and you feel ultimately that you've achieved what you set out to do. And it's one of the greatest musical feelings that you can possibly get, and it's why so many of us and everyone really should be partaking into the art, because it's such a great feeling that personally myself, I don't get anywhere else. And knowing when to stop practicing, when you reach that high, to give you the most amount of motivation going to your next practice session the next day is just so great, and it's such a healthy thing to do and incorporate into your musical practice. So I strongly recommend all of you to do this. I personally do it myself, and although I've fallen down the curve a few times, and we all do, don't beat yourself up if you do that. It's easy just to keep going. Once you realize that curve and once you know what your high feels like, then you know that's your time to stop your practice session. As you practice more, you'll know how you work as a musician more, and then from that you can gauge all of this and just have the most happy, productive practice sessions, which is what we all want at the end of the day. Now in today's video, we're tackling quite a big issue, especially with a lot of beginner bass players, but it can affect intermediate and more advanced bass players, and it's why am I not getting better? What am I doing wrong? And what can I do to actually get better? Well, in the first place, we really do need to pinpoint something. Getting better is entirely subjective. While there's an objective goal of what you want to do to get better, the feeling of getting better is entirely subjective to you. If you really have played a lot of good gigs, perhaps you haven't made a lot of progress, or perhaps you have made a lot of progress, or less than you might have done in the practice room, but you feel like you've made more progress because of those experiences. And ultimately, you feel like you've made progress based on what you've previously done and what you're doing now. And it can feel perhaps a bit annoying when in your past you feel as if you've done something better and now you're doing it worse. But a lot of the case, when you think, oh, what was I doing a month ago? And you think back to it, you're like, no, I have got better since then. And I've got one great tip. If you're really stuck in this place of where you're like, no, I was just so much better back then. As soon as you start playing and start practicing, just record your practice sessions, just the audio, but video as well, and then you can assess technique and things. And if you just record one every month, and then if you ever feel demotivated, go back a month or two and you'll be like, oh wow, no, I've definitely made a lot of progress. Like, watch your most recent one and then watch the one a month before it, and most of the time you'll be able to see, okay, no, I really have made a lot of progress here. It's entirely subjective. It's just how you think of it in your mind, and often when you're burnt out and demotivated, you can get similar feelings. And there's one thing which is great to fix this as well, is rather than perhaps if you've got a teacher and they want you to learn this tune and you're really just not enjoying it, perhaps it's too difficult, you're not liking it, and it's just completely not interesting to you, then go to your teacher and say, hey, I'm not really interested in this, and say a tune that you're interested in learning and say, hey, just as a compromise, can we still learn this tune, or perhaps pick a different tune that perhaps may interest you, but also alongside it, do something that interests you a lot as well. And often if you're with a teacher, they'll say, no, that's totally fine, and they're very happy to work on things, especially if it's one-to-one with you, that you're really passionate about yourself, as ultimately they're there to teach you music, they're there to make you better players, but they're also there to encourage you and inspire you to do more music. They give you the skills to do this yourself, but if you're perhaps not there yet, or you want to work with something with them and make sure you really get it right, then it's great to take some of your own listenings and give it to them and say, I want to learn this tune. For example, maybe if I was doing grade 6 piano and I was doing loads of classical tunes that I didn't like, and I was like, well, what about if I did a jazz tune, maybe like Cantaloupe Island, Footsteps, Sugar, something like that, something that interests me more. And obviously that comes from me as a jazz context and coming from a jazz musician, but I still think the concept stands that if you're not playing music that you enjoy as a musician, you'll feel burnt out and you feel like that the music that you're playing and producing isn't good enough, and you feel like you're not making progress because you don't enjoy what you're playing, is essentially the main scope of it. But there's also a third category which I think doesn't get talked about enough, And it's when, if you've got this big project coming up and you work your hardest for it and you do that project and you absolutely smash it and do amazingly, then why afterwards do I feel like I'm so awful and I'm so demotivated to practice and I'm just not making any progress? Because I've had this big thing and now I'm just on this absolute crash. And that is very common, especially if it's like the biggest whatever you've done in your life, the biggest gig, for example. You can often feel very demotivated and very much like, I'm just not making progress. I'm so frustrated with my playing after those events. And if that is you, that often will pass. Give it a month probably, but you can always work it back in by just trying to start something new, trying to start something fresh, turn a new leaf perhaps, and see what you can get from there. As once you apply these techniques and you think, okay, I maybe have had something recently that I've really been working for and I'm feeling demotivated, once you accept it's a totally normal feeling that loads of people experience and you're not the only one alone that feels this way, and accept it, and then make recordings of yourself, and then you can look back through the months and realize you are actually making progress. Musical progress does ebb and flow. It's not always up and it's not always down, but you will see mixtures of the two. So don't feel too bad on yourself if it's gone down, and don't be too hard on yourself. If you just keep working at it, you will get better. The overall trend will still be up. And again, record yourself and take note of what you're doing and really assess your playing, because your greatest critic really is yourself. If you think, oh no, that was perfect, I couldn't have done anything better, then perhaps you're being too kind on yourself. And if you think, oh, everything I play is awful, then you're being too harsh on yourself, and perhaps get someone else to assess it for you to give you a different perspective. But that's all I've got for you today on why you're not making progress. Another great thing just to end on as well is, if you're not practicing consistently, doesn't matter for how long each day, but just practicing for 5 minutes, 10 minutes each day does wonders for your playing and progress improvements. Just one little thing, 5 minutes every day. You could work on a tune over 2 months and spend 5 minutes on it each day and get through it, and often you'll find you'll make way more progress than big lengthy sessions, perhaps less frequently. So get on the bass as much as possible, and at least 5 minutes every single day, and you really will see a progress spike, as well as all this other stuff of why you may feel like you're not making progress even though you are. So I hope this has given you a bit of self-motivation, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.